Welcome, everyone. We're so glad to have you join us today. And today I have a very special guest, two guests. I've got Brian Alterman and Elliott Greenberg, co-brokers of Rental Guys Property Management. So welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
So these guys have been in the property management space for quite a while now. They do rentals. They work with homeowners who are looking to place their property up for rent, those investors, and they work with tenant placement. So people who are looking to rent, they help them find the space. So again, welcome. I know that y'all are in a family-owned business. Yeah. So tell me a little bit about that, how that dynamics works when you're like, so you're not killing each other.
Well, it can be fun, and it makes it a little bit easier, in my opinion, because we all communicate pretty well, and we always have each other's contact info, so we reach each other pretty well, and we kind of have departments that we work in, so not everybody's doing everything, but we all work together pretty seamlessly in communication as far as what's going on with certain properties, what progress they're making in different processes, whether it's moving in, moving out, or getting repairs done, or just all the facets that kind of go with property management.
Sounds like communication is the key there, and that everybody has their own department, so to speak, of what you're supposed to do and what not to do. Is that about right?
Yeah, it's very much team vibe. We all have our, let's say, strengths where, I might be the person that today is going to the listing appointment or to meet with an owner. And then on the back end, we might have somebody else that's more skilled in, let's say, handling the maintenance or repair issues that might happen in a property.
Okay. So today's market is super tight for sales. Is it the same way in the rental industry that there's very little out there and a lot of people want the same property?
Yeah, I would say it's almost worse, if you will, than sales, because with sales, you might have a few thousand in your pool of options in terms of inventory to shop. Globally, or we're talking about in a whole region rather than just a state. But anyway, so in Northeast, we might have, let's say, 2,000 given active for sales. In the rental space, we might only have 100 in that same amount of space. So it's a much, much smaller pool of active rentals. And then even further than that, it's which ones are in the best possible condition, newest, obviously are going to be more appealing to somebody that's looking to rent as opposed to something older, dated, and obviously other things like school districts play into that as well.
Yeah, and I hear a lot of times that people who are looking to rent, they're just as picky as the people who are actually going to buy a home. It's like, this carpet isn't
sometimes
nice
more.
enough, or sometimes more. Do you have any examples of anything like that where people have been extremely picky over the rental?
I actually have one currently. It's actually a really nice home in St. Johns County. I think it's around $2,000 a month rent. It's good rent, good home, great neighborhood. We were going to install some ceiling fans for the tenant. He had requested them, and this owner decided he wanted to add ceiling fans to this home because it does make the home nicer. So it's a standard size room, 8-foot ceilings, I would say, and a standard ceiling fan that hangs down 4 to 5 inches, from the ceiling. Mm-hmm. And this tenant was concerned about that being a safety issue where they're hanging too low. When they're standard size, standard room, they're not even low ceilings, but he was just very picky about exactly the types of fans that he wanted versus just getting fans that were provided.
You wanted very specific fans.
And when it's your house, you're more than welcome to pick out what you choose. Touching on some statistics for the lack of inventory right now, I actually just looked up as of yesterday in the local MLS for NEFAR here in Jacksonville, which isn't a 100% picture because there are some for sale by owners and some property managers who don't list on there. But just to give you an idea, right now, as of yesterday, there is 505 active rentals across Jacksonville in Northeast Florida.
Oh, ouch.
Which covers 3 counties.
All price points as well, right?
And I didn't put any limitations to bedrooms, zip codes, price points, just across in NEFAR, which covers 3 counties here. It's 505 active rentals.
That's not much. So that leads me to wonder. So you've got all these people that want to go after just kind of like in sales, you have so many tenants that are going after one property. How can a tenant stand out with their application against all the others that they're against, that they're all wanting the same property?
Yeah, I think
Completed application for one. Go on, Brian. You can elaborate.
I think there'd be a couple tips I would give them.
Okay.
And one is to start their search early.
Definitely.
Most management companies won't hold a property open for more than 2 weeks to 4 weeks tops.
So do people actually ask you, will you hold this property for me?
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, not in this market.
Right. And so my suggestion would be prepare to have overlapping rents. Timing it from when you move out of your last place to when you can move in your new place. The shortest time gap in there would be ideal. But in this market, you might have to move in a little bit earlier than you have to move out. And you might want to make sure you can cover 2 rents just in case you have that overlap to make things easier on you. Also, just to have your financials in order. If you are a self-employed or a cash earner, those are the hardest ones to qualify because it's harder to prove where the income comes from and how consistent it is. So the more you can show consistent, regular deposits, then it's easier to verify. And having an application that's easier to verify will get you approved faster and less likely that somebody else could come in and get their paperwork in first and swoop in underneath you kind of.
Now I know that some companies, they'll just take lots of applications and then they, I guess, pick the best one. That doesn't sound like the ultimate way to do it. So I know that Rental Guys Property Management does it a little different. How do y'all do that?
We do take multiple applications if we're waiting to get things back from people because not everybody turns in everything right away.
Okay.
However, we do try to limit that because we don't like people wasting application money. So 9 times out of 10, when we're talking to different people that have been viewing the property, we'll tell them if we've already have somebody in line to wait, don't apply yet, just wait on our wait list. And then if something falls through with the application that we're working on, we'll give them first notice to go then apply because we don't want them wasting application money if somebody's already ahead of them in line.
So it sounds like
and we're approving these apps pretty quickly. I mean, within generally a 48-hour period. So you're not waiting an entire week to, hear the answer no or yes.
So it sounds like a really good tip for a tenant is to make sure you have all of your paperwork together when you go and you apply. Your financials, your reference letters.
No different than in sales. I mean, in sales, you're going to obviously, just the same. You'd pre-qualify them and you'd make sure their ducks are in a row, so to speak.
Have
before I'm going to go and buy a home or put in an offer. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Very good. So in sales, there's the Big Z, that company, the Big Z. And I think in the rental space, you have one that's called the Rent Meter or something along those lines. So my question is, how accurate are they on pricing rental properties? I know they're really off on sales. Is it the same situation for rentals and how so?
Well, I'd compare it to a dealership. When you go into a dealership, and you're going to trade in your car, for example, they might build into it some fees and things like that. Are they giving you Kelley Blue Book true value for your, for your car? In this case, it's kind of a guess. You're assuming that they're probably not giving you maybe the top end of that range. You're probably getting maybe in the middle or possibly even at the low end of the range, depending on, how they feel and your motivation as a new shopper. Same thing can be said in a rental space where you're looking at these Zestimates or these, automated systems where they're evaluating based on, for rents and as well ones that have recently closed that were for rent. You still have the same. You're going to have a range that they're going to establish. The range can be off by as much as, 30, 35% in certain markets. Zillow will talk about that actually on their website. I hate mentioning the name, but I know the Big Z. So they'll mention it. And so it's specifically, do you want to give your home away? It's the same concept. If you could squeeze more out of it, we want to educate our customers to say, well, maybe that is truly the value of your rent, but could we get more because we include things like lawn care? Or maybe because we're including additional services, or even just the fact we do professional photography. And I know that in the sales space, that's a normal thing. In rentals, it's not. And so, and so when we're doing this...
They're doing their cell phones?
Most of the time.
Or worse. Maybe they don't have any photos.
Maybe they have a Polaroid.
Okay.
Yeah, so those things play into the ability to get more money for your rental.
Okay.
Yeah, and everything he said is true, I'd say. And it's like in the sales arena, they don't know the inside of your home. They don't know the condition, the quality of the inside. So they're just basing it on what's happened in your neighborhood, in your area. But not two houses are completely different, even if they're next door to each other. Just one maybe is updated, one maybe isn't, and that will come play in a factor of your rent rate.
So let me ask you this one. So if you have, I would imagine that sometimes you have, it's not always family. Sometimes you have roommates or partners, that type of thing. What happens when you rent something to partners or roommates, and one of the roommates, or they don't get along, or somebody moves out? What happens then? Who's on the hook for the lease?
Everybody. You're responsible for your friends is just as much as they're responsible for you. So if you damage something, you guys can work that out internally, but ultimately, it's going to be taken as a whole household from the whole security deposit. It's not their portion versus your portion. It's everybody's responsible like a family. So
in the same vein, HOAs. There are HOAs all over the place now. So how do fines work when a tenant does something? Maybe the lawn hasn't been kept up, which is a great reason, Elliott, you mentioned, to include lawn care in your management. Is we'll take care of the lawn or the pool or what have you. But what happens when they don't and the tenant is getting fined? Who's actually getting the fine? Isn't it the owner, and how does that work?
Well, hopefully we can avoid most of those issues by being, proactive, and checking on the property regularly is a way to do that. The other thing we do, or try to, if we can include like the lawn care, for example, in the rent, is it's a tenant responsibility. And if they neglect it, let's say for a period of time, we'll serve them a 7-day notice first to make sure that they have the ability to cure it. After they, let's say, go beyond that and they didn't cure it, and now it's leading into HOA situations, well, now we'd have to do an investigation. Why is it that after a 7-day serve notice, are we still continuing to get the HOA, on our back, so to speak? That would most likely in this case be a tenant responsibility, but it also depends on what the lease stipulates, Zelda, because some leases like ours say that the tenant's responsible for the lawn. Others might say something differently, and obviously you can negotiate differently.
Every lease is different, and every company works differently too. And honestly, even every property and every owner can be different, because we manage some where properties include lots of services and some that don't, even if they are in nicer neighborhoods, HOA type neighborhoods, where we definitely want to make sure the lawns are kept up, because that is a big deal with HOAs.
Is lawn usually one of the biggest things that you hear about?
Yeah, it depends on the community. If it's a smaller community, like a townhome or a condo community, it can be parking issues. Mm-hmm. But in the single family homes, I'd say mostly it's lawn care not being kept up. And ultimately it's the owner's the one getting the bill. It's their property.
It's their fine.
But we pass that along in our lease to the tenant being responsible for it.
It's all how that lease is worded.
Exactly.
So I know that several years ago, I've only done a little bit of property management. That's not my space. I'm into sales. But I do recall having a rental property once, and there was a scam involved. So, in fact, I had it recently, about 2 years ago. So, are they still prevalent? And what kinds of scams are out there?
Yeah, they're definitely still prevalent. And honestly, now, maybe more so than before.
Oh, wow.
Just with newer technology, and it can be good and bad, because there's definitely technology to prevent things like that, but it also gives them access because there's a lot less face-to-face communication with the way to renting properties now that they can get through. When people are asking for money before to even allow you to go see a property, which I hear all the time, that just amazes me.
It's a red flag.
That's exactly what happened. I was showing a property to a couple, and all of a sudden the door opens and the lady walks in. She says, "What are you doing?" I go, "Well, what are you doing?" Because this was a property I was managing. And she said, "I just rented this." I'm like, "No, you didn't." And she was like shocked, and she had sent money in to somebody for a deposit, and she was out that deposit because this was not her property. So,
well, and it's one of the reasons, Zelda, that we truly try to stress the importance of going to look at a property before applying. It's kind of a requirement for our particular company, but not all are going to be that way. So just if you're doing something on your own, keeping in mind, you want the people that are going to apply to walk the potential space.
Before you send the money.
Before you send any money.
So don't send any money.
And do research on the companies, the people if you can. I know a lot of times you're renting from a homeowner or a self-landlord.
Is that a red flag?
No, because there's a lot of them out there, and they are legit, and they are good people and good business people. So no, I wouldn't say that that's a red flag. It might be harder to find information on them to really do your research and check who you're dealing with, though. Whereas like people like us or other companies out there, check, do research on them. We have a website, we have social media accounts, we have company email addresses that we're emailing from. Various things that, of course, all of that stuff could be made for fraudulent purposes, but that's a lot of work to go through to do that, to get the reviews and build the website as deep as ours. That I think there's enough information out there that somebody could find and say, okay, this is a real company. Yeah. And that's the biggest thing I think is just do research. Don't just give money to the first person who answers the phone
and check who owns it. There are ways you can check to see who owns a property. I had a property for sale, and I was working with the buyer, and the next thing I know is the seller is calling me saying, this person knocked on my door. They want to rent my property. And it was the buyer who hadn't closed on it. He's already trying to rent a property and collect money. The deal fell through, and that was a good thing because it was not that he was a scammer, but trying to do.
He got ahead of himself. It sounded like
underhanded, and I'm like, and you're telling the bank that this is going to be your homestead, and that's called fraud.
Lots of issues.
Mortgage fraud.
Lots of issues on that one, but absolutely, you can't.
I'm glad that deal fell through.
If you don't own the property, you can't do anything with it yet. You can't advertise it for rent if you haven't closed on it. The day you close,
he even took the pictures that were on the internet. I'm like, those are copyrighted.
So he stole copyrighted photos.
Well, we deal with new construction a lot, Zelda, and what ends up happening is it's still in the builder's names a lot of times, even after they close. Mm-hmm. So what we have to do then is obviously our research in order to get an executed agreement so that we know this is truly the owner of the home. So, that goes into that as well.
When you close on a property, you get paperwork, a stack of paperwork. In there is the deed. Usually the counties might take 2 to 4 weeks to update their online records, but they get that the day of closing. So an owner can always send us that as proof of their ownership and that it's closed. And now we know, okay, we can move forward with our process of either getting it ready, getting it advertised, or whatever we have to do for them.
So it sounds like probably one of the best things that you can do if you're looking to rent a property is start with the professionals, the property management companies like Rental Guys Property Management. So let me ask you this. What does a property management company typically do?
We're your middle person between the owners and the tenants. We keep the peace. We protect them from liability things, because sometimes owners might accidentally promise things to tenants in conversation without even knowing it. But tenants hear things and then they assume, well, you said it, so it's going to be done. Yeah. Oh, I've been meaning to get that thing fixed over there for a while. Well, they took that as you're going to fix it. And now you are on the hook to fix it. And you might not have wanted to or been able to afford to. And it might not be something like not an air conditioning where it's an emergency or a mandatory thing, but maybe a fence panel. And, the fence panel doesn't have to be fixed, especially if the tenant saw it in that condition before they even applied for the property. But if the owner just says, oh, yeah, I've been meaning to get that fixed, now the tenant says, well, you told me you were going to get it fixed. And so when owners and tenants communicate, there's a lot that could be just said in natural conversation without even knowing it, and you're accidentally promising him things. We are in the middle of that, so we know what to say and what not to say in certain situations to protect the owner from having to do maybe unnecessary repairs or over-promising things.
Sounds like you should also get things in writing.
Always, always, always. Everything's in writing. We love email because we love everything to be in writing.
I just had a conversation with another realtor this morning, and it was, this phone is only for text messaging. And then they explained it was because they want everything in writing. So I thought, well, I didn't like the fact that I couldn't reach the other realtor, but I totally got it.
I get it.
And beyond protection, we're also looking out for the owner's best interest in that we want to maximize their dollar, their return on an investment. I mean, if that's their end goal, obviously. Some of our owners are very bit nicer, I should
say.
They're generous. And they are okay with maybe taking less than what the market dictates for rent. So it's all about communicating with those owners, what their goals and expectations are, and then bringing them through the process of, yes, we're going to place a tenant. Yes, we're going to make sure that the lease is executed and that it protects you. And so those are things that a good, gifted property manager is going to do. And in so, you have now long-term relationships with tenants staying longer. Typically, as a result, rents are higher because they're being professionally managed and maintained. So all that plays into, at the very minimum what you pay a property management company.
Yeah, we do a lot, all the day-to-day stuff like you mentioned, the collecting the rents, taking the maintenance calls. Do you want to get the calls at
midnight.
11 o'clock, midnight on Saturday night,
I've had
on
them.
Thanksgiving morning, on Christmas Eve? I mean, they come in.
And you have to deal with
things
it.
break. They don't plan around
Tenants don't
holidays.
have a calendar.
And neither do
Their calendar
appliances.
is it's broken,
Or a
fix
clock,
it.
right? Or a
Right.
And neither do appliances. So,
Yeah,
we don't know when things are going to break. But when they do, we get the calls and not you.
That's true, and you'll deal with them. So what is the property management screening process on a tenant?
For a tenant, we will verify their income. We will verify their credit and make sure they don't owe any past landlords or utility companies, because that's kind of a red flag that, in my opinion, one of the most important things you should continue to pay if you run into money troubles is your housing and utilities. And if those
Always pay the rent and the mortgage.
if you can live without a car, you can't live without a roof necessarily. And if you're not paying those, then that's a big red flag. We check employment verification, and we also try to check rental history verification. And I know not every company does that, but when you're interviewing property managers, you should ask them these types of questions. Ask them, how do you qualify your tenants that you're going to place on my property? One thing that we do is try to do a rental history verification when we can. It kind of depends on the situation, because not every situation it's possible or accurate, I should say.
And when you're dealing with professionals, it should be transparent. Like, for example, on our website, we're very clear about the criteria that we screen for with regard to applying. And even on the application itself, it kind of re-highlights or reiterates the same information.
I would think that would be a very good thing for the homeowner to know, the investor, because I believe, if I'm not wrong, that your eviction rate is 0, which is,
correct.
That's a good question to ask if you're looking for a property manager, is what's your eviction rate? If they go, 3, 5, whatever, you really want it to be 0, meaning they've screened those applicants so well that there are that there's not going to be an eviction. There's not going to be a problem.
Correct. We don't need to necessarily take the first applicant, nor do we. And nor do we, and I've heard this in the property management space, a guarantee placement within so long of a time, because those are, again, red flags to an owner that's looking and vetting these management companies. You want somebody that's taking and looking at all applications and actually screening through them. So we might take the 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th person that applied because we looked at sourcing of income. We looked at employment history. We looked at rental history. And so we went through all of that heavy vetting before selecting the best possible tenant for that property.
Because not only does the homeowner not want any issues, you don't want any issues.
Exactly. And I tell owners that, we don't like to do the guarantees, because when we're running up against our deadline of our 3-week guarantee for you, and we promise you something for free if we don't deliver, we want to take who comes in next, so we don't have to give you that thing we promised you for free. But in the same breath, we do want to make it easier on us too. So if we put a bad tenant in there, we're the ones getting the calls.
Yes.
And we're not getting the calls just from the tenant. We're going to deal with it from the owner side as well. So I prefer to live my life easier and stress-free if possible.
Yeah.
So we like to choose the best tenant and not necessarily always the first tenant.
So what is with all of these issues that can be a problem, what is the biggest issue that homeowners seem to have? The homeowner, the investor?
Well, to me, it's not necessarily that they have it, but one of their biggest concerns would be finding a quality tenant who's going to take care of their house.
Definitely.
That's the number one
For me, I'd almost add to that. From my experience, it's sometimes unrealistic expectations. And what I mean is that because of the big Z, and they're looking at these values, the values can sometimes be skewed so much in their favor that now they've gotten this cloud in their head of my home is better than everybody's home on this planet.
Well, everybody thinks that.
Of course. And because of that, I'm going to demand more money than, let's say, the one that just across the street rented for X amount of dollars. And so as a kind of result, they're like, well, my home's always better. And because of that, I want more money. So it's just kind of bringing them back down and meeting of the minds, if you will, to reality, where we can say, no, this is based on data. We're doing heavy research. Brian and I, when we qualify an owner, we're really heavily looking at comps so that we know when we walk that property, without a doubt, we're within the range of, what we set as the expectation up front. We're sending them the comps. It says a range, usually of about $100, $150. And then they know we're not going in there with far-fetched expectations of getting you triple what you're thinking.
Yeah.
So what counties do y'all work in?
We work really in Duval, Clay, and northern St. Johns County.
Okay.
For the most part.
Do you do anything in the St. Augustine World Golf Village area?
Of course.
Yep. Yeah, we work kind of historic, kind of downtown St. Augustine in north mostly. We have a handful in the World Golf Village, Outlet Mall area. We have one that's actually advertised right now in the Outlet Mall area. So,
how about Nocatee?
yeah.
Do you do much in Nocatee?
Many.
Yep, Nocatee homes are very nice. We like those homes, those owners, and those tenants. We go all the way out there into Ponte Vedra.
It's actually the hottest market right now in, well, I don't want to say Florida, but definitely for Northeast Florida. Nocatee's our hottest market. I'd say I'm seeing like $2.25 a square foot. To give you an idea, Duval County across the bridge, or even Clay, $1 a square foot. Same exact square footage, home size, and layout, but yet you're getting double, almost triple value in a rental space. I'm sure it's the same in sales because of that zip code.
Yeah, Nocatee is selling the lifestyle. They're selling the lifestyle.
Location.
That's right.
And in Nocatee, it is a lifestyle. So, yes. Well, y'all have been so wonderful. Thank you so much for being my guest. What I like to do is to wrap it up and let my listeners learn a little bit more about the people that I have on the show. So I like to just ask a couple of personal questions. I'm going to ask y'all a little different questions, but I'm going to start with Brian and ask you, and these are just fun things, has nothing to do with what we're talking about. It's just all about you because people like to do business with people that they know and trust and love.
Of course.
Yeah.
And so I'm just going to throw these out there. So Brian, what's your favorite holiday memory?
Favorite holiday memory? Well, this goes back to middle school days.
Okay.
We were waiting for Hanukkah to come, and I had Hebrew school lessons that afternoon, and I got home from school. I didn't have very long before my mother was coming home to take me to Hebrew school. And as a kid, I wanted to try to sneak and look in the closet and maybe see what my presents were going to be coming up. So I climbed up her shelf in her closet, and those old 1990s style metal wire racks in your closet, well, it broke and it's not meant to hold me. And the end bar scraped all the way down my thigh. I have about a 5-inch scar now on my leg. But of course, I couldn't tell her because I would have gotten in trouble. Yeah. So I band-aided it up and stopped the bleeding and went on with my day and actually went on with my life until about 20 years later, I'd say, I finally told her what happened.
Oh
she never knew.
She's learning about it today, right?
Yes.
By the way, Mom.
So that was my my one holiday memory and secret that I kept for a long time.
That's good.
So my next question to you is, what would you, at this point in your life, what is something you would say to your younger self?
Probably start sooner. You know,
good one.
Looking back now,
That's a good one. I'm gonna say.
and that, and always, you know, one of the things I've learned as well, which I wish I learned sooner, was, you know, don't be the smartest person in the room. Yeah. You know, and I know a lot of people have heard that, but it's true. You know, I know when I go to networking events and things, and I'm socializing and networking with people that are a lot more successful and savvy than I am, and the feeling that you get and the excitement that you get and the education that you can get is worth it. So that's one golden rule I would probably try to remember.
They're always willing to help too. It always surprised me. You know, no matter how successful somebody was, you know, whatevers, they would always help you.
Yeah. I got some of my greatest advice from people who were really successful. So those are great answers. Thank you.
Good stuff.
So and the last one for you, Brian, is what's a fun fact about you that people just might not know?
Well, when I was 18 and graduated high school, I decided I was going to move out to Colorado to start college, but also to go snowboarding. And my family probably didn't love that too much because they wanted me closer, but
so you were going to go
that.
to college in Colorado,
but not to be a professional snowboarder.
Not really to go to college, but to go snowboarding.
I was a full-time student in college. I did all my work, but I also had some free time to go snowboarding a lot more often than my once-a-year vacation.
When it's in your backyard, it doesn't make sense.
That's great.
So that's a passion of mine: water sports, snowboarding, wakeboarding, extreme sports. So that's something kind of a little different outside of real estate for me.
That's true. That's great.
Definitely.
Okay, well, thank you. And so I'm going to ask Elliott a couple of different questions. So,
please,
Elliott, what's your favorite holiday memory?
I guess mine. I like the gift exchange that as a family we used to do, where you know, like a secret Santa, if you will. But ours was a little bit devious where you could steal gifts from each other. And so it kind of created a little bit more fun. And then obviously, that's probably fondest to me. I like the gift exchange.
The gift stealing.
Yeah, and the stealing.
It's like an activity, and it's a lot of fun.
All right. And what about your favorite book or movie?
Oh, that's a good one. I'd say Pay It Forward. I've got several movies, but Pay It Forward is always a good one. I like the concept of the movie. The ending, obviously, if you haven't seen a spoiler, it's dramatic, but very, very good. I think it plays into legacy, and it's like thinking about, when I leave this earth, so to speak, not to be all, morbid, but when you do, what are you leaving behind, and thinking about that, constantly, or, paying it forward.
Kind of thinking about, like what's, behind you and not thinking about you in my mind. Because I like the movie as well. It's a good movie, but yeah, legacy is a good way to put it.
Yeah, it's your legacy.
Other one is American History X, but that's different reasons.
Okay. I thought you were going to name a book, actually, because I know that you're really big on the Dave Ramsey stuff. So
he's good.
Okay. So, and the last question for you is, what advice would you give your younger self?
Patience. So similar to Brian's, I like the, being the dumbest one in the room, so to speak. But I think it's important that in today's society, everything's fast paced and it's all social media, internet. I need it now. I need it yesterday. I needed it 5 minutes ago. And so for me, I think I would tell myself, slow down, be patient. 100 years is a lot of life to live. Even if you don't make it that far, obviously, we all know. Granted, Brian and I's generation will probably, odds are, make it to 70 plus. It's kind of like the normal, I'd say, longevity and statistics. So I would say just massive, massive patience, because you got a lot of life to live.
There you go. And that's our show for today. Thank you to Brian Alterman and Elliott Greenberg with Rental Guys Property Management. So if you're looking for a home to rent, or you want a property management company that is absolutely top-notch, they're the guys to get in touch with. So
thanks for having us.
You're so welcome. And until next time, this is Zelda with Live with Zelda.